They essentially reiterated their support for Hong Kong's leader, Carrie Lam, and the Hong Kong police. Of course, this comes amid mounting calls for the city, for Carrie Lam to step down. She has insisted since the beginning that the government's decision to make those changes to the extradition law was not a mandate from Beijing. But really, this has been hard to believe for many in the city, given that she was put into power thanks to Beijing's backing. Now, at that time, it was clear that Hong Kong's leader was going to have a pretty tough time juggling growing demands for democracy in the city on one hand and Beijing's demands on the other. And interestingly, some analysts actually believe that she may have already tried to resign over all of this, but was prevented from doing so by Beijing. Now, perhaps it wanted her to clean up the city first without further damaging the one country, two systems image. Now, that system was something that was again mentioned today. But as far as Hong Kongers are concerned, that line is already very much blurred, and analysts have also suggested that, any resignation by Carrie Lam would be sending a sign to the international community that Beijing would back down in the face of popular pressure, and that is certainly not what the Communist Party would want.
Sam, can you give us a sense of how people there in Beijing and throughout the mainland are talking about what's going on in Hong Kong? Because as we know, the information that people get in mainland China is heavily censored. Are people able to get the full picture of what's happening? And are they concerned about how this makes China look to the rest of the world?
Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, this is the first time that they've held a press conference like this, and undoubtedly because violence is escalating while criticism from the international community is mounting. Now, Beijing, as we know, has already been quick to reject US and UK criticism of the Communist Party over the protests. And just yesterday, it released a statement urging foreign politicians to stop sending the wrong signals over the issue. Now, China recently said it believes US officials were behind the protests in Hong Kong and actually asked America to essentially back off. But of course, as I say, international criticism is increasing, particularly after the attacks by suspected gangs on demonstrators, which then raised questions about whether that was hired help from Beijing. At that time, the protests have really broadened out to much wider calls now for government reforms around democracy, but now also for inquiries into the use of police force. So it's now really extended far beyond just this extradition law, what they're calling for in Hong Kong. And so it's easy to see by the number of journalists on the ground just how much pressure is on authorities to address this when essentially the whole world is watching.